Well, hello there, everyone. Here to show you that the monitor or recorded like activity right here, basically talking about the basic meaning for if somebody were to say that something is like for like if it's going to be like any technical support or any service calls or anything like that, to where what it basically means for whenever something's monitored or recorded. And of course they may say it could be both too, but knowing basically about what exactly does it mean. And I'm like, yeah, that you have right here is like examples right here of if it could be maybe people maybe playing phone tag, or it could be somebody who makes a phone call and somebody else that answers. And it's like those that make the calls, and then it's like those who answer, pick up the phone, and then the way that they manage the calls as well. But you see right here is I went ahead and drew right here, if this was right here, example right here of me, and let's just say that if they say that yeah, this call could be monitored or recorded for quality and training purposes. And a lot of times that I keep thinking about who really wants to record the whole conversation about what I want to say about something, if it's going to be anything that's related to maybe that the phone call was maybe related to a question on a bill, or maybe if it was taxes or something like that. But on your hand, I went ahead and drew right here is like a scale. It's like you have right here is like a line bar scale for from 1 to 6 to where rate the overall says expectations, to where that knowing about how the call was handled. And I know that a lot of times companies and business would more likely do this, to where that they for how the call was handled. And a lot of times anybody that may wonder that for the most part is that whenever we make a phone call, to where that knowing that that they make a phone call for a reason, and maybe thinking about really about if their voice is really going to make a difference. It's like they say that thank you for calling so and such, and I can remember whenever I was a kid, I can remember that a lot of times that making phone calls, especially if they were long distance, it's like that had to have the parents' permission, or that particular reason why you made the phone call. But I know that nowadays that you have to be like around 18 just to do that. But let's just say on average that you have right here is talk about right here that back whenever before. I was at 17, if I can remember right, that it was during the meetings whenever I was in school, once or twice that I usually think about anything that for any meetings or anything like that I attended, and thinking about, I'm like, really that if I was the only one there, or maybe talking of it's like, if I can remember right, once or twice I went to the meetings that they say there ain't no parent or guardian who has to be with you, and then they would ask me a few questions, and I I can remember that once or twice that they say that would you like to have something to snack on, or maybe something to drink while we were talking about important changes related to the student student report or something like that, for how well you're doing in school or on a job or something like that. But on average, that and a lot of times they say for a nice seat too, a place to sit down. But you have right here is like if somebody like me right here were to be sitting down and making a phone call, and be like, and they say that hey, this call may be monitored or recorded for quality training purposes. And if it's going to be maybe calling a company, that they might likely say the same thing. So they say to just watch the language, and as well as for how you handle the call. If you're going to be upset about something, is a way to how to handle it in a proper manner. So, and just thinking about, I'm like, if we're be talking to the person on the other line, and thinking about this person could be maybe a realtor, or if it's going to be anybody in particular, such as maybe a salesperson, or if it's if it's going to be anything that's related to direct line extensions or something like that, is thinking about they pick up the phone, and then like that it could maybe be the wrong number too, and thinking about that, they, well, you were transferred to the wrong, department, please hang on, I'll go ahead and transfer you to this number. And so it's like, knowing for how the call is handled to where, what we basically be looking for is if it's knowing about, if it's a wrong number or if it's, that there's like numbers to be transferred. But let's just say that, I guess, I don't know if that necessarily means by between monitored or recorded. That basically means it's like, that we'll go ahead and trace the phone to where, knowing about exactly where the person is, where the call is coming from, and basically get some other source of information. But let's just say on average that I guess they say that, for how well the person does their jobs, and I usually thinking about it is that way, to where that I don't think necessarily to where that they would be, recording, the phone conversation about, anything maybe confidential, to where that, they ask about, that, maybe something that was related to maybe medical expenses or, anything else personal, but and for how they handle their job. And knowing about whenever people answer the phones, that a lot of times that they may say that, hey, I'm like, may I ask you, well, where are you calling from? And as well as that, if you're in school, and as well, and knowing that, that you tell you about any latest updates or something like that. So this kind of reminds me of those toy phones, of course, that I used to buy them. Like you see the advertisements about people talk on them. You talk to them like if they were an actual phone, but I'm like, and then a couple of numbers that you call, and they're like, well, this, you're on a recorded line, or this, your call may be monitored or recorded for quality training purposes, for any type of training purposes. And thinking that, I don't know, it's like for if I were to be making a phone call and being like, make a, want to record it, the conversation to where knowing about really, if like saying that, for they ask you a question, I can remember that if anybody say, if anybody want to give me any kind of attention, such as to where you ask me a question like, what are your plans are for the next 3 years from now? I go, we'll get my degree as well, the type of job you're looking at. But on the other hand, knowing that the types of questions they do ask, and like thinking about, I'm like, really, that really, who could be listening to me, who could be watching me, and thinking about, really, can they tell if knowing about, there's a phone right here, and being like, there's a phone right there, and let's just say that there's you got a pen and paper handy. So it's like, they ask him, like, do you got a pen and paper handy, and go and write down the number that they give you or something like that. But let's just say that that this was right here, was me right here, and be like, the type of attention that maybe I may be thinking about while during the conversation, to where that you'll have nice conversations, maybe if it's with the doctors. And I'm sure anybody say, if you're going to be talking over the phone, maybe with the doctor, and they say that, this call may be monitored or recorded for quality training purposes, please speak to your patient, your so-and-so, and be like, that, this is him, can you please verify your insurance, and as well as, for the reason why, for your visit. And then, so if it's going to be maybe the doctors, or maybe it's for a job, or maybe for a meeting or something like that. So I guess, it's all about, I guess, for monitored or recorded, I guess it basically means for how people, it's like, how well, the calls are handled. If the phone calls are based on anybody who's having any problems with trying to understand something, and as well as for knowing about, this person, that they started as a student, they were a student, and after about maybe 3 years, that they wind up getting a job, maybe as a sales assistant, or maybe as a rep, if it's going to be maybe as a counselor, or maybe as a doctor or pediatrician. I'm like, if later on that they wind up getting a job, working as a pediatrician. So knowing about that monitored or recorded, I guess, may mean for a number of reasons, but one of those things more likely would be, it's like the type of information that maybe the company or business or certain location, that the information that they collect just to know and kind of test for knowing about how well the job was performed, to where if all the questions that were asked, they got the right answers, and as well as for how the call was handled. So it was like anybody that may wonder that I'm like, do like what you call like a test, to where that how aggravated anybody will get, to where that I'm like, you'd be able to tell that maybe on emails compared to making a phone call. I'm like, they're like, while I have you on the phone, can you log on to this website here and type in this link, to how to get there, and be like, there maybe someone's like, well, it's giving me a message, saying it's not working, but and I'm sure that anybody who is while they're talking on the phone with somebody and trying to get something to work, if it's going to be maybe online, it's like if it's going to be tech support, to where if they give you a number to use, and think just to go ahead and complete something, and think about really about that while the call is being recorded, that they basically is a measure about from like a scale from 1 to 6, or maybe 7 or 8 or 9, 10, something like that, to where that they rate to where how satisfied you were with the service that was received, and as well as for any new employees and any new business people who do come into the company later on, that they may have some of the other recordings on set, to where that that for the most part is that hey, that we that you were training this person right here, that they kind of gave you good feedback to where how you handle this other person's calls. So it's like knowing that a lot of times that if it's like knowing about whenever you make a phone call, that you may be used to making phone calls to friends and family, but then on your hand too, if you're going to be on the phone, maybe talking to an attorney or a lawyer, or maybe if it's from a doctor, or maybe a pediatrician or a nurse, whichever, and thinking that I'm like, that first time making a phone call, maybe using a phone system, and maybe a new phone too, about how clear it comes out, and be like, say, hey, how you doing, mister? It's like, hey, it's good to hear your voice. What's been going on? Yeah, hey, how may I help you today? Well, we'll see what we can do. But so it's like in a lot of ways that whenever I make phone calls, a lot of times, if it's going to be the other person on the other line, and being like, hey, that like, thank you for calling so and so. It's like how may I help you? And knowing that the other person on the other line that may say that would you be willing to participate in a survey after this call, and this call may be monitored or recorded for quality training purposes, and please verify your information, and how may I help you? Are you experiencing technical difficulties? So in a lot of ways, that if anybody were to think about what exactly does that mean, and basically that for how well that they did their job, and then for how they they took the call, and I'm sure that most phone, like if it's either not over the phone, which I know that like if you want to chat with an agent online, that they may monitor some of the conversations there as well. And thinking that I'm like, really, that I don't think necessarily to where the situation is to where that they're trying to avoid disobey. It's like for the privacy, to where that if anybody were to probably say that anything that more likely that's said and done, that more likely that they say that hey, that well, this person wasn't very happy with this for what they were experiencing problems with, and so it's like the voice could be heard by by the manager or something. But the way I think about it usually, to where that anybody that may say that anything that I say or do, that more likely that they like that for how it was handled, and for what the person understands, and for how the person handled the job as well. And thinking about, I'm like, really, that the type of attention the more likely I could be getting is to where that knowing about really that if they did their job, then really what's my job is like, well, just think about it. It's like for being a student, and then for being a that person to where that for the type of experience to where what it's like to be able to make the phone call, and then even if you were on hold for about maybe a few minutes or so, to where it's like that while the call was being handled, and then let's just say if you were on hold for a few minutes, and they may say that this call may be monitored or recorded, and I'll be like, well, is that included whenever somebody's put on hold? Whenever somebody's put on hold, I am sure they usually say that that there's music you can listen to, but then on the other hand, they may say it's not the same thing compared to talking to somebody, such as an agent. If it's going to be an insurance agent, and then they may say that this call may be monitored or recorded for quality training purposes, so it's like knowing the type of phone devices that more likely that anybody, like if me or the other person on the other line could be using, and being like that it's like with my writing, and be like that the person who answers the call, and being like that they may know the person's name as well, and be like it shows up on their systems, and so it's like nowadays with phone technology to where that you're able to to tell to where that I'm like are they sitting at a desk, or that they sitting in their living rooms or somewhere, maybe in sitting at home or somewhere like that, like to taking a phone call, or maybe if on a cell phone or something. So in a lot of ways, it's just thinking about a mic right here with me, to where a mic that this phone right here would have a wire, but let's just say if I were on speakerphone or on a cell phone, and just thinking about that really that for how well the call is handled, and just thinking that really that that for how the call was handled, any questions that I had, and then if they were answered properly, and knowing about them, like, hey, okay, well, I understand, well, okay, well, I'll see what I could do on that. And if we were talking about anything about maybe updates, computer updates or anything like that, and then I would maybe go on a conversation about that as well. But sometimes that they may say that to where most phone conversations is that really that they should only last for about, if anything, maybe 10 or 15 minutes at the most, to 20 minutes, and then off to the next call. So they probably have a number of calls, quite a few dozen of them, maybe hundreds of them within the day's period, and then thinking about that one phone call at least should only last for about 15 minutes. But just thinking about with the way the call was handled, is knowing about really, do you think that the person handled your call properly? Did they do their job, and as well as for anything else that was requested as well. So knowing about right here is to say for the understanding about between monitored or recorded to say kind of activity. For any examples for between monitored or recorded, and knowing about like you have right here are some people right here, and basically that these people could be like would say is just listeners, and just thinking that any calls that more likely that I could be making while in an office, or maybe working on my homework or something like that, and thinking about really that somebody answers the call, and answers any questions that I may have, and for how the call was handled. And there could be about maybe maybe after about maybe a year, that there could be about maybe a group of other people that if they decide to work for the company, and then I guess that they get trained just by listen to the audio, to where that it's like for how this person who was a student or an employee at some point, and then that I guess it's say about the future, to where that really I'm like that for anybody to say that that they would be looking at me and be like, I used to always think about for eye-to-eye attention, to where I'm like, excuse well, what y'all looking at? Well, we're looking at you. Like, well, what's the reason? Well, anybody who more likely speaks, if you're attending a meeting or something, and maybe we would like to hear what you guys say. But I used to always think that too, that to where a lot of times that really, anything that I would say or do, that I'm like, I try to keep it to myself anyway. But nobody really wants to know anyhow. But if I were to write a paper or two about it, and then get somebody interested in thinking about, I'm like, really, that who could be looking at me or thinking about for what I do. But on the other hand, the way I think about it is that it's like knowing about for how it's handled too, to where I'm like, there more likely will be some people who are interested in what I do, and it may take a while, just for something to come, such as maybe job opportunity or something. But let's just say that if these people right here were like people who were watching, listening, to the conversation, to where at the calls, or any situation that was came to where if it was monitored or recorded, for training purposes, to where just to kind of give people an idea for where how the call and how the messaging responses were handled. So it's like a lot of times that thinking about, I'm like, that anything that more likely that could be used is like thinking that that with this with this person right here with me, that I'm like, really, I don't really know if anything that I say or do is really going to get me anywhere, but at least that for stuff that I got to take care of. But then on the other hand, I'm like, maybe to help somebody else, to where that help them understand for what they don't understand. But I keep thinking about, well, I'm not a teacher, so I guess for me being a somebody for a trainee or something like that, I guess they say that seems like it requires a lot of professional experience. But one of those maybe that they say that well, on the other hand, that for how well that the call was handled, for how the question was asked and how it was answered, and then having the passionate for respected attitude about it, is done about I'm sure it'll work out, or hey, well, I'm working on it or something. So in a lot of ways that I try to be nice and friendly each and every time. So it's like that whenever I do make a phone call and actually talking to somebody, and be like for all that's listening to or knowing about the types of information that more likely that could be used for training. But other than that, like talk about understanding about the between monitored or recorded, so very say connectivity. It's like color activity right here, and knowing about, I'm like, do I think that there could be maybe a girl listening on the area, and do I think that there could be maybe a guy, like a guy that more likely could say that that he wants to know a little bit more about for what I learned about 2 years ago. It's like that there's a guy, or maybe somebody who's interested in maybe the same particular study. So it's like knowing about, I'm like, for whenever calls that are being handled, is like knowing about that kind of use them as like for reference. You say it's like for anything that's on record, anything that's for reference purposes. But other than that, like I say for monitored or recorded connectivity.